The Dungeons and Dragons community is a vast and growing community. I've been a part of it for about 6 years now, give or take. I got into it at the beginning of my freshman year of high school, and ever since I've just been in love with it. And like I said, it's a growing community, and it's already, of course, really big. And it's had several times where it was big, like back in the 80s was the first time it got really big. And then it went into obscurity for a bit, got big again in the late 90s, went into obscurity, and then recently has resurged to be bigger than ever. And so it's just steadily growing at this point, and honestly now you really can't throw a rock anywhere without hitting a D&D player at this point. You're gonna hit one. And honestly, if you ask me, it's kind of like, how marijuana is a gateway drug. Well, that's how Dungeons and Dragons is with other role-playing games. Because once you become a part of the community, you're going to introduce to other ones like Call of Cthulhu, Star Wars, Starfinder, Pathfinder, what have you. So, I mean, you end up getting introduced to a whole bunch because everyone in the community wants you to be a part of their games, and they might be running other ones, and whatever it is they're running, you want to try it because you just love doing it. And that's how I ended up getting into all of them, because I first started with Dungeons & Dragons, and then being part of that community got me segued into playing a Star Wars role-playing game as well as Call of Cthulhu, and then eventually Starfinder, which I also fell in love with. So this is one of those things where you're going to constantly get interested in new things in the community, and it's great. There's no real shortage of things to do in the community at all. There are all kinds of options for games you can play with depending on what suits your taste, but anyone can be a part of the community, and that's what's great. I mean, really is all kinds of people. It's not just the stereotypical closet nerds. I've seen football players playing Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, hello. Again, it can literally be anybody, so it's not just made for super nerds, I promise. But that's one of the great things about it. And it's constantly growing, like I said. Honestly, faster than it ever has before, really. I mean, we're now in the 5th edition. So that's how many iterations it's gone through. But yeah, it's just steadily growing, steadily getting on up there, and it's no longer one of those things that's obscure. Like, the likelihood that you haven't heard of it at this point is pretty low. Because most people I can talk to, they might tell me, oh, I've heard of that game, but they may have not played it, but they know what I'm talking about. 10 years ago, I promise you I could have mentioned Dungeons and Dragons, and some people were like, what? So, it is what it is. But that just shows you how big the community's grown, and it's so far-reaching. Like, I've played games with people in Australia before, which is crazy to think about, but it goes on a grand scale because people from all over play it. So it just tells you how big the community has gotten at this point. And there's just something special about that, and I don't think anything at this point could keep them from playing, because COVID happened, and even with the quarantine, we were still playing. It was Discord, using Discord, Roll20, stuff like that. We had no shortage of options for ways to play online while staying at home. So it's a very adaptable community, and it's great. So I want to encourage anyone and everyone to try to find a way to be a part of the community, because it's just such a fun community to be a part of. Everyone's weird, everyone's crazy, and it's great.
Well, my name is Levi White. I'm actually a TA here at VSU. I'm working on my master's, and I am teaching as part of the degree. How long have I been a part of the Dungeons and Dragons community? I'd say it's been about 10 years now. I got started right after high school on a night of boredom, and making fun of how big of a nerd I am, and then suddenly me and my friends found a wonderful thing called Edition 3.5. hard was it to get into Dungeons and Dragons? Well, getting into the game itself did take a little bit because there were a lot of rules references that we didn't necessarily understand at the time, but being a part of the community means having people you can talk to. And once you start doing that, it's a lot easier to sort of get where everything goes. So I'd say the first week was slow but interesting. After that, it was all gravy. The D&D community being close-knit. Well, right now I'd say that there's somewhat of a divide, only because people are considering different schools of thought with recent developments in 5th edition. But I think that speaks to how close the entirety of the community is as a whole. I'd say, even when arguing, it's a really close-knit group. What is the best part of the D&D community? Having stories to share that everyone can sort of understand and take part of. Anytime you play a game, you get a new story to share, and whenever you do, there is a common ground for understanding, and anyone who's in the know gets a good laugh out of it. Ways to stay connected with the group during quarantine. Well, my favorite method has been Roll20.net. It's a wonderful website that sort of has inbuilt dice rollers, an inbuilt board that you can mark on, automated character sheets if you want to keep track of the math, any notes you want to make. Besides that, having a Discord server with everyone being able to talk, whether or not they're playing a game at the time, really keeps everyone together. Because honestly, at the end of the day, D&D is about community, and having that small community on Discord keeps us together no matter how far apart we are. Do I think anything could keep D&D community apart? After experiencing the quarantine and recognizing that even across state lines, different time zones, having to stay locked inside for Lord knows how long, no, I don't think anything's going to keep a group apart that wants to be together, especially with as accessible the game as D&D. How far does D&D reach? Honestly, I'm usually surprised by this because I've found players from all over the world. I've read articles that were translated from, say, Korean about Dungeons and Dragons. Of course, here in the States it is a much bigger game than other places, but there's no shortage of D&D players across seas. How would I encourage someone to join the D&D community? I'd say if you're a fan of telling fun stories, experiencing things with your friends, and having a better reason to hang out than just come over and eat potato chips, we can have you come over and eat potato chips and throw some click-clack math rocks around. If you want to join D&D, the best reason is having a group of friends and coming up with the silliest reason.